Hi and welcome back to my 7 horror reviews in 7 days series. Today I'm going to be reviewing a film that's a little bit more obscure, and that is the 1976 film The Town That Dreaded Sundown. I say that this is a little bit more obscure just because in England anyway, this film was pretty hard to find when I wanted to watch it a few years ago. It was very hard to find it on DVD. I know that a few years ago it was released on Blu-ray in America, but then again it was hard to find that in England. But you can buy this now on Amazon in the UK and definitely in America. And that maybe has a little bit to do with the fact that another version of The Town That Dreaded Sundown was released in 2014, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So this film, as I just mentioned, was released in 1976 and was directed by Charles Pierce. And the story follows a murder spree that takes place in 1946 in a town called Texarkana, which I've learned now is a real place, and it borders Texas and Arkansas. Arkansas? I don't know how to say these American states. Arkansas is a real place. So we're following the story of a masked murderer called the Phantom Killer, who's wearing a very plain, sack-like white mask that's quite reminiscent of Jason's mask in Friday the 13th Part 2, although this film was made first. My number one favourite thing about this film is that it was based on true events. So not like a lot of horror films where it may say that it's based on a true event, but really it's that one person was killed in this town one time, and so it's based off of that. A quick internet search will teach you that despite a little bit of embellishment with the killings, this story does check out. This film is a very early slasher film, and that does make me wonder why it doesn't have a little bit more popularity. It was released before things like Halloween and Friday the 13th, but it does seem like it's a relatively unknown film unless you're super into slasher or horror films. The style of The Town That Dreaded Sundown was very unique for the time, and actually I do still feel like it is very unique now. It's got a kind of documentary type feel to it, so the film's narrated throughout. It's a reenactment of the killings, kind of like docudrama type. We follow each of the killings by the Phantom Killer, and we also follow the stories of the residents of Texarkana and the police squad that are trying to track the killer down. The MO of the Phantom Killer is that he's going after couples who are doing the typical 1940s, 1950s American thing of going to Lover's Lane. So they'll drive up, they'll park up, and he'll be lying in wait for them. Which does really make me think, if this guy is known to be going after couples that are going to this Lover's Lane, why are so many of the couples still going to this place? You're going to get killed. The Phantom Killer does do things that aren't very typical of other slasher films, like for instance he does use a gun and a musical instrument. I'm not going to get too much into the musical instrument thing because it is a pivotal scene of the film, but I've never looked at this musical instrument in the same way since I saw this film. I've talked a little bit in past videos about how I really do enjoy comedy horror films. This film does have a comedy element, but it doesn't work as well as others that have come out more recently do. Don't get me wrong, there are some parts of this film that did make me laugh. There is a patrolman that is called Sparkplug, who's actually played by Charles Pierce, the director of the film, who is in the film purely for comedic value. And there's a particular scene where he and a couple of other police officers are trying to lure the Phantom Killer, and the way that they do that is they dress in drag and pose as couples lying in wait for the Phantom Killer. I did find those scenes pretty funny. I do know from watching other reviews over the years that a lot of people were really not into this comedy element of the film. I'm not too bothered by it. I feel like it didn't really add anything to the story, so it could have been totally left out and it would have made no difference. But I do agree that because this is based on a true story, it could have done with maybe having a more serious tone. I really like the character of the Phantom Killer. His costume's very, very simple. Like I said at the beginning, it's just pretty much a white sack, like a pillowcase on his head. Very, very simple, yet very creepy. But I feel like it is a little bit disappointing that we don't learn an awful lot about the killer, but that does keep it true to life, because in the real events we never learned who the killer was. The mystery's still unsolved, so I can appreciate that in the film. However, one thing that I don't like so much about the film, and I've talked about this in other reviews, is that we don't see any other kind of real character development. So we don't learn about any of the victims, they just tend to kind of turn up and be killed. It would have been nice to maybe focus on one or two of them, learn a little bit about them, just to connect a little bit more with at least one of the characters. As I mentioned at the beginning of the film, there was another The Town That Dreaded Sundown that came out in 2014. That film is not a sequel and it's not a reboot either, it's actually a meta-sequel. And that's a little bit complicated, but basically, we're back in Texarkana. We're all aware of the killings that happened in 1946 in Texarkana, but we're also aware of the 1976 film, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. That film is screened every year on Halloween for the town. In the 2014 version, the 1976 version of the film is being screened at a drive-in type thing. They don't have them in England, and that makes me feel pretty sad, but I don't think it would work anyway with all of this rain that we keep having. So we have this couple that are watching the screen of the film, and then for some very, very silly reason, despite the fact that they're watching these killings happen on the screen, the killings that were based on real killings that happened in their real life town, decide to go off to Lover's Lane. And surprise, surprise, the Phantom Killer shows up. We then start following a very, very similar story to the 1976 version. The killings are very much mirrored, and we even see a return of the musical instrument scene. My favourite parts of the 2014 version is that we do see a little bit more character development around the lead female in the film, and the silly element of the film is completely taken out. It is more pure horror slasher film. I do want to do a full review of the 2014 version at a later date, so I don't really want to get too much into that film. I did just want to touch on it, so I'll rate that when I film that video. I was umming and ahhing a little bit about how to rate this film, because yeah, it does have its silly bits. The acting isn't the finest, but the fact that it is a very early slasher film, it's pretty obscure, and the true story did make me intrigued enough to go and research the actual murders. Makes me think that I should score this 3 out of 5 pumpkins. But for now, that's it for this review. Make sure you come back tomorrow to see what I'm going to review next. Bye!